There's ways to work it. It's just not easy. Yeah. It's just not easy.
I'm running out of days. What's the date today? 17 days.
What happens in 17 days?
People expect to be on the TV. It takes a bit.
Well, I appreciate that expectation.
Not with lunch.
I'm going to, let's talk about that expectation. Okay, session 3, application submittal. So we're going to talk about your budget, your application review, submitting your application. Oh no, it's wrong. And what happens if oh no, it's wrong? It's not all bad. And then troubleshooting and what we're going to do with that. So we'll try to get through this quick so folks can get off to lunch because I know it's been a long morning. Okay, so your activity budget, there's 2 parts to this. You have your activity budget, which is all of the funding sources that go in to fund your activity. And then you have your CDBG budget. This is the money that you're expecting to use out of CDBG grant and program income to fund your activity. Sometimes it's the same, right? You have 100% CDBG funding this activity and it's the same. Lots of times it is not. You've got 9% tax credits, you've got a little home over here, you've got some area for aging, you've got whatever you've got in there, your activity budget is going to be more comprehensive. That is an upload. We're going to add multiple upload buttons, so please make it Excel, because I like Excel. It's easier to check math in Excel than it is in PDF. It's very hard to check your math in a PDF without pulling out a calculator. So that'll be your activity budget. So we're going to be looking to see that your activity is fully funded or pretty darn close. Then you have your CDBG budget. Your CDBG budget needs to be put together in the actual CDBG application. So it looks like this. So here we are in our application screen, right? I got my little application down here. These are your budgets. Once you've gone in and named your applications and you've done a save and you started putting information in, these budgets associate with that application. You can also tell by whatever date you started it. I'm going to click on the budget, and here is my budget template. Our budgets do not auto-calculate your GA. GA is limited at 7%. We trust that you all can do math, right? We all finished high school at 7%. The times and the point and the O. Okay, so you're in charge of putting your budget together. We figured since activity delivery, we're no longer tracking hard against that we could carve that extra 0.5% off of the general administration and use that to actually fund planning grants. Because we want to fund planning grants. My goal is to hit that 20%, 19.99999, and get as close as we can to the limit so that we fund as many planning applications as we can. Because that's been something that HUD's been like, you have been underfunding planning applications. Well, let's not do that anymore. A trick that you can use if you want, to kind of help track that 7%, when you're doing your general administration, you click on the top, you click on the circle, you add a table. You can change this to indirect cost. And there's a nice little percentage calculator right here that will track your indirect costs. So you can use this tool to track and see how much GA you identified, and then just change it over from indirect to direct. If you screw it up, it's not a big deal. We'll help you fix it on the back end. But that's just one way to help in case you don't want to sit there and do the math and math it out to tell what that is. For your budget though, so you click on your budget for your activity. You click down, you add table, add a row, put a title in, put a description in. You can do the unit cost. eCivis did a whole training on this, or you can just put the cost of the item in. You can put the GL code that if you have a code tracking for that. So for instance, it's a consultant with a PO number or with some other account number. If you've got an internal tracking number, go ahead and put that there. And then, everything is direct cost. If you want to do something indirect cost, let's have a conversation. Won't be a bad conversation. It'll be a good conversation. Yeah.
On the GA, I apologize. Is it before there was a management memo that capped GA, especially for like an OTC? to $100,000. And it could not exceed that, even though it was less than 7%. Has that been rescinded?
Yes, the NOFA supersedes.
Okay. Thank you.
That's all I had to say about that.
How broken out do you want that activity table on, like, let's do a construction project?
So this actually is a good opportunity to kind of tie this all together with that task and milestones and all of that. You know, if you wanted to say, okay, our construction project, we have architecture and engineering, we have our construction contract, we have our soft costs. You know, if that's a level of detail you want to go to, great. If you want to be like architect, line item, engineer, line item, grading, line item, flat work, line item, the offsites, line item, that's fine too.
Okay.
It's up to you how you want to structure that. I will say, when you go in to do your funds requests pull off of this budget. So it might make your life a little more interesting if you've got it super delineated. I would also like to say if you've got a consultant contract and that consultant contract is all GA, I would set up a GA line item that says consultant contract and then put the not to exceed of the consultant contract in there and then another GA line item that says staff costs. That will actually make it easier when you go to do your funds request, right? Because you'll have your invoices and you'll have your documentation and it'll all line up. So.
One more. Sorry,
Yeah.
before you go. I know that you were trying to recoup some of those pre-application
I'll get to
costs.
that in just a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so, say you've got, you know, your standard construction cost estimate
Mm-hmm.
that you might put in your Excel part that's above this.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you come down to here, you could have, construction management, labor standards, and then.
Correct.
Just like 4.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And the one that we upload, a little more detailed, that doesn't have to be stamped or anything by an engineer, right?
No, it just has to identify, what we're looking for out of that is that your activity is fully funded or darn close, right? That you've identified funding sources for your full activity. So what we don't want to see is, like, you know, that you're going to be funding operations for a homeless shelter. This is a kind of a project we're working on right now. And you've only identified operations funding for 4 months. And you're asking for CDBG to cover an additional 2. That's not very long.
Yeah.
So we need to come up with a game plan to keep your shelter open. But if you are predominantly funded, mostly funded, CDBG is gap financing, it gets you 100% there, or you've got a game plan for your gap, then that's sufficient. And when you go in and do your budget narrative, because your budget narrative is right down here, one of the things we're going to be looking for is and there will be a little bit more information about this, is what do you do if you don't get your full CDBG award, right? I don't think we're planning to partially fund any, but this is something HUD's like, what do you do if you only have enough money to partially fund? And we've been like, I don't know, what do we do? So we've got to start documenting that. So there will be a component in here where we'll be saying, what do you do if you only get partial funding?
That's never happened.
I know. It happens everywhere else in the world, it just doesn't happen here. For a lot of projects, the project does not work is not a wrong answer. There's no right or wrong answer to it. Like if you get partial funding and you're like, well, that makes my project infeasible, duly noted. Note that we won't partially fund you in a way that makes your project infeasible. But if your response is, well, we'll just do 2 less loans, or we'll just do less loans, or we'll just scale back beneficiaries, then we're like, okay, now we know that if we have a remainder, we can reach out to you and say, hey, do you want remainder funding to do your activity? We don't have enough to fully fund you, but we can give you this much. Are you set up? And the answer is yes, then rock and roll. The idea here is to make it so that we're actually utilizing every single dollar and not sitting on money.
That would not be applicable to an OTC, where it's a project that needs all the funding in place and the project's not going to come out.
It is less likely to be applicable to an OTC, although I would still like to have a statement saying this project is not feasible if you don't fully fund us, just for the sake of completeness.
Well, I guess what we're doing are all the funding sources and underwriting criteria.
Right.
That all the funding sources are in place. Historical, way back when, the CDBG would come in contingent upon the other sources. but recently it's been, CDBG won't come in until all the other sources are in place.
On the ED, yes.
Yeah.
That has not been true on anything else, because there's never been an OTC on anything else.
Well, so I'm just saying, but on the housing thing, that would be a similar type of situation. If it was a single project versus multi-unit.
Well, if you're doing acquisition, you don't necessarily have all your funding sources in place when you start the acquisition. And if you're doing tax credits, tax credits are competitive now. It can take you 2 or 3 cycles to get what you want. So we've got to have some
ED is
flexibility.
a lot of them say, we'll fund, the bank will finance you if your CDBG funds will cover these costs.
Yeah, everybody wants to be last.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be last. It's like high school when you had to go do your presentation. Who goes first? Somebody raise their hand. I like going first. You set the bar. Okay, so yes, you want to have your upload budget that shows how you've got everything funded. I would like a statement in the narrative. We'll include that, in one of the things that we add to the uploads that says, here's what we'll do if we're not fully funded. And if the answer is not do the project, that's okay. We're not saying we're not going to fund you. We're just asking this is a what if scenario.
I do have a question about that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, say you got a public works project and it's replacing the pipelines. Conceivably, they could do less than the full amount. They are, of course, not completely resolving the health issue because, only half the
Right.
system got redone. Will we fund a circumstance like that?
So if you didn't hear Terry's question, Terry says, what if you're doing like a series of pipeline that could actually be scaled back, right? So if they had partial funding, instead of doing the whole mile, they'll do 3/4 or half a mile, right? And the reason we're asking this is like, okay, so let's say we get to the end of the year, like at the end of the funding, it's September, we're about to shut everything down, and we've got 1.5 million, and the next project in line was asking for 3.5, and we go to them and we say, hey, we got 1.5 now, do you want it now? And they say, yes, it will get us started on our project. There's no 50% rule, so they can come in for the remaining funding in the next program year. It would allow us to actually get started on the project, right? They'd scale back their scope to what they can actually do with that amount of money, and then they'd come in for the remainder later. This gives us the ability, you might see my goal here is to get the money going as fast as possible, no turnover, no sitting on it, no waiting. Very, very, very short windows. So this is why we're asking for it. If the answer is no, we can't do it without being unsuccessful, then duly noted. Like come in under the next cycle, we'll roll the money and it'll be what it'll be. But I would like to not roll money because it ages quickly. So Chuck's over there cringing
Well, the
and
thing is, I'm
grinning.
thinking of the bridge to nowhere. You build so far, you didn't complete the project, you're hoping the money's gonna come in the next fiscal year. Before, like, they used to do the multi-year financing, so you knew it was gonna be there. But from my understanding, that's no longer in place. So, say you get your 1.5, you need 1.5 to finish, but you're not competitive next year.
It's not competitive, it's OTC.
But say someone else came in and already took the OTC funding away because,
All 20 million of it?
well, that's
Off the
this year.
get-go?
I'm thinking future year.
Well, I know what you're saying, but see, the goal here is as many projects get done, money gets disencumbered, we're funding down the line. If you have met all of the readiness criteria, you've already uploaded an application once, you should be pretty darn fast to hit that submit button once the period opens.
Okay, so there's more flexibility.
Yeah,
Before
yeah.
it said you had to have everything in place to
We-
complete the project.
We actually have increased our flexibility so much that if your budget needs adjustments and assistance midway, let's have a conversation. We're not locking you into everything forever. Like,
Okay.
what do you need to be successful? But at the same time, we don't want to be sitting on money that we don't have to sit on. And if
Okay.
they've got a project that could scale, let's fund a project that could scale. Yeah, different mentality, I'm sure.
Just an example then?
Yeah.
We come in a project and say the project commitment is $5 million for this fiscal year for an OTC.
Mhm.
They get into it, they know that it's probably going, when things get into the quotes and things have changed really quickly lately, that it actually turns out to be an $8 million project. This has happened on a couple OTCs in the past. They could come back in with the same application for the other $3 million.
Well, now that I'm gonna have an issue with. why did you come in with 5 million if it was actually 8 million? Like, how long did you sit on it? Why are your bids not current? Why is your information not accurate?
We talked to, Placer County alone, within 3 months, the cost went up 30%.
Then you gotta have a conversation with us. We need to have a conversation and talk about it, right? I'm not funding the same project twice. That's, HUD's gonna look at you and be like, so how many times are you gonna dip that in the dip? I'm like, sorry.
Well, but you said the one that was half done, if you're funding that one.
But they've scaled it back. They've taken half of their scope
Okay.
out of the project,
Okay.
right? So now it's a project that has scaled to the budget that's available. We're not funding the entire project, right? That's actually a really good segue into program income and how program income works in this. And then I'm gonna get to your pre-agreement costs. So there is a program income budget line item. It works the same exact way. You click on it, you add a table. It's very straightforward. But here's kind of what we wanna see in your program income budget line item. So here you've got PI, cash on hand, money in the bank, right? You're gonna put 500, turn the numbers on, okay, 500 into your cash on hand. This is money that you actually have. You've got add a row, PI, general admin, right? Cash on hand GA, out of your PI. Got 10,000 that you're gonna use for that, sweet. Oh, this one. I'm getting excited, okay. PI. Okay, projected receipts, and projected receipts through this time period. I want that in your contract, right? Now we know how your money's gonna go. We know what you're gonna do. You've put your projected receipts into your activity. Now, your scope of work should have options in there to pay for those projected receipts. So, for Terry's project, if she had done this and we scaled it back, said, we only have 1.5 million in grant funds, she can now use her projected receipts to continue to carry that project on. If you're doing a project that has discrete locations, add additional locations so that you can say, here's how much we have funded, but if we get program income, we're gonna do this much more. If you're doing a project, dial it back to your basic engineering standards, say, here's what we'll add in gold standard if we get program income. Terry, go ahead first.
Well, and what happens if you get as much as you thought?
Well, you should have your scope, your task, your narrative, your project scaled to what you have with options to add for what you might receive.
Well, if you're doing a construction project, you let the contract in April, you're getting on the come through December. Whatever, it's like, oh, well, wasn't quite as much as we thought, so then what happens?
So when I have done these contracts in the past, I had my optionals, my mandatory optionals. I required my contractor to bid on them. They told me what they were gonna cost. I put them in the contract and then I conditioned them. If we receive funds, we will add these items to this scope of work. It's a done deal. You don't have to procure it. If the money comes in, it's already set up to do it. It's already in your resolution and it's already approved. So, if we're doing a community center and we want to add benches and picnic tables and gazebos, well, that's not in the initial budget. But if we get program income, now we have the function to add picnic tables, benches, and gazebos. So it's a matter of looking at your project, saying, what is my baseline, what's my base project cost? And then having a mechanism by which you can actually add bells and whistles to your project. You want to add solar panels? Fantastic. This is a good way to pay for solar panels. But it means looking at your project budget and the way that you actually structure your project much more comprehensively. You've got to have a better handle on what you're putting into your project budget. We can't gold star fund these the way that we have been. We've got to have a mechanism to include PI, and you either add it or you subtract it. I would rather add it to your contract cost than subtract it from your grant award. Yeah? I want you to use it. I don't want to free up money. I want to spend money.
Are there implications, you know, when you get into the future receipts and so forth, implications for the, as it applies to your reuse agreement?
So, thank you for bringing up reuse agreements. So we had a whole PI module in which we talked about how program income reuse agreements were gonna be a thing, and turns out they don't actually function with the system. They're incompatible with the way the system operates. So they're going away.
Whoa, wait, say that again?
Okay, so program income reuse agreements, that's been how we've been doing it. We had, when I did the PI training back in, like, what was it, August, I guess? That was how we thought we were gonna be moving forward. The system was still in development. It doesn't actually work in the system. A blanket agreement is not a functional component to the system. We have to have activity-specific agreements, which means, I guess we can do a blanket agreement and then do activity-specific agreements, but that's a big pain in the.
Right, why?
Yeah. So why have this blanket agreement? HUD actually doesn't like them. They were super excited when I said we were taking them off. They're like, thank you, thank you. We have to have a contract to use the funds. We've got the mechanism to do it and keep it super straightforward, so we'll just do the contract to use the funds. It will get faster, I think, the more we do it too.
But you still don't have a timing of when the PI only funded activity
March.
module, March?
And
Yeah. Well, end of March is the contractor's deadline, and I've got to test it, but yeah. So PI only stuff, there won't be a program income reuse agreement, but if you set up a revolving loan fund, and what you're doing is revolving loan fund, you have set up your activity, that can be a contract with a, 5-year lifespan to it, and we reevaluate it every 5 years. We have a lot of flexibility on how we structure those agreements. So the agreement terms on those aren't gonna be your standard 3-year expenditure deadline, get her done. It's, if you're doing something that requires an ongoing use of program income, you can structure that. Yeah.
I guess on
Which
the-
is why I want you to put your program income in your open grant, because it's way more straightforward.
Well, but the PI, you're saying you could take PI and move it into a GA activity for this new application. If you have PI, because the challenge that some people have is they have to spend all their PI before they can draw down GA on the new grant. So you're stuck in limbo. You're saying that you can actually take part of that PI that you want attributed to it and move it from an activity dollar into GA.
Like what you did
What you
there on
just
line
did there.
2, right?
I didn't move it, I added it. So I said, this
just
was my
set
cash
aside
on
an
hand.
amount for
This is what I
GA.
knew, what my GA,
Your
allowable
GA
GA
that
set
you
aside.
have based on the 17% of, so you've got that amount, but then you still can't, you say your GA for that period is going to be 3 times that amount. The way things have worked, and I've had that discussion, where they can't draw down on the GA for the new grant until all the PI is expended. In which case, you're sort of stuck.
Yeah, so I think I'm following that, like, you have to actually spin through all of your, like, that you get locked up in your PI. So PI spend to 0 is gone, that's not an issue. This budget has you putting your money where you need it. If you run out of program income for that line item, you move to grant for that line item, and it doesn't.
For the line item.
For the line item.
Oh, okay, that's a change.
Yeah, it's different.
It's different.
Okay, and then on the future one, is that for the period, like say for example, you're doing a development deal, and you have a certain time frame when you're gonna complete that. So
Mhm.
you're saying any PI that would come up during that period, that you would think that you would want it attributed, which means would reduce your grant request.
Doesn't reduce your grant request, it's on top.
Oh, okay.
It's additive PI budgeting. We don't wanna do grant reductions, because grant reductions means we disencumber funds. This is why I want folks to kind of think about this. When you're looking at your budget, what's your baseline, and what are your bells and whistles, future PIs, bells and whistles, plan for it, so you have it already allocated when the time comes, and you're, or potential budget overruns. I mean, as you said, cost increase are happening very quickly. If you've got PI in there as contingency for budget overruns, I'm not even gonna blink. It's gonna be like, sweet, good job, well done. Now you've got a game plan to use that PI. And it's in your stuff, right? It's in your resolution, it's in your documentation. You've already planned for it, it's in your process, right? It's in your standard agreement, it doesn't require an amendment. We can just kick you off on it and we can go.
Okay, well, so, on your new application, you're gonna put, PI in for your contingency.
Mm-hmm,
You have a 2018 grant,
mm-hmm.
and you're,
Drawing that down.
well, yeah, it's like, how do you manage?
Okay, so,
those?
right, so if you've got a 2018 grant and you've got PI cash on hand, I'm really sorry, that cash on hand needs to go into your 2018 grant. Whatever's drawing money down first. Planning for future PI receipts though, that's not cash on hand, that's money you expect to come in, right? So on average, you get $100,000 future receipts. That's, just plan for it. We're asking you to plan for it, identify it and plan for it. So you can have cash on hand and you're using it in your 18 award, but you'll be planning for future receipts in your 19 award. You just gotta tell us that it's future receipts, right?
So if you're applying for 3 or 4 different activities,
Mm-hmm. Put your PI in the one that goes the fastest.
so you'll put that and you'll have your cash on hand. On the other ones, you won't, you're basically gonna say I have 0 PI on hand, even though I do have PI on?
Well, you'll put some, yes.
Okay.
So we're letting you budget your PI into a specific activity, whichever one you think is gonna go first, put your cash in hand in the fastest activity. And then you can take your future PI receipts and put them wherever you need them. They don't have to be in the same activity. The way that the system's actually gonna track is it's gonna set up a PI account for you, and you're gonna report your PI into that account, and then you'll have that money to draw from as you move forward. At least, I think that's how it's gonna work. Still working on it. We're building this plane as we're flying it. It's awesome.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna be that jurisdiction that doesn't wanna commit their PI. Cause I've already been asked. But they've got PI on hand. Will they be penalized?
No, I'll come take it away from them.
I just wanna be sure to tell them that they really need, they have to commit it.
So here's what's gonna happen is we're gonna send out an email that says, and John's cringing because I told him I would never say that. We're gonna send out an email that says, what's your cash on hand? We've got to true up our
This
PI
is the
balances.
true up, right?
Yes, we're gonna true up our PI balances with HUD. And then we're gonna say, you have 60 days to give us a game plan with what you're gonna do with your PI. And your game plan might be, come in for a new grant. That's a very simple response. It's an email, it's 1 line. It's like just a handful of characters. Coming in for a new grant, thank you very much. Or, we're gonna set up an RLF. Okay, duly noted, start the process. Or we're going to do something else with it. Okay, well, what's your timeline, what's your scoring? You know, you'll have to actually come in and let us know what your schedule, your milestones, your tasks, your expectation is if you're gonna do something other than set up an RLF or come in for a new grant. They can't hold it. They cannot hold it. Because you gotta think of it this way, if all PI is state PI, and the federal requirement is that you spend program income before you spend grant dollars, and jurisdiction X is sitting on PI, the entire state's in violation of the requirement. Like, the entire state's in violation. So, for grantees sitting on PI puts, not pointing to you, puts all of us at risk, right? It puts us all out of compliance. So they have to have a game plan for how to use it. Now, my pushback to HUD is, it's crazy hard to budget a project when you have to move your PI around from activity to activity. This is my attempt to lock it in where you say, no, that PI, that's encumbered. Woohoo! Right? It's in a budget. It's in a contract. It's in an agreement. And putting future PI in there puts you in a position where you can actually use it. Without having to be like, well, no, switch it over to this funds request. Now switch it to this funds request. Now, like, that's crazy making. I'm still working with HUD to get this totally approved, but it's gonna happen.
Well, I appreciate that because, you know, I work with several jurisdictions and I think that, you know, CDBG sometimes tends not, especially PI, it gets ignored. And this really puts things in motion that if they don't, they just can't continue to ignore it anymore. And so you said it perfectly and I'm gonna relay that to my client.
And here's kind of the deal, if they have a loan portfolio that they can't manage and they have PI and they can't spend it and they don't have capacity and they don't have political will and it's just not working out for them, cool, we'll help them. We'll take your portfolio, we'll take your PI, we'll administer your portfolio, we'll take over. And it's a no harm, no foul if it's voluntary. There's harm and foul if it's involuntary. Like, like if it's, you know, spending PI to cover general admin costs of, you know, the city manager or whatever, it's completely unrelated, that's a different deal. But if you can't do it, you can't make it go, and I know a couple jurisdictions that I worked with that, they're gonna take this up because they couldn't make it go, then we'll give it to us and we'll get it back out into the community, because it's gotta be helping people, it's not supposed to be sitting in an account. Yeah?
Is because right now, 2 more days, the PI, semi-annual PI reports
Excellent,
due.
so it's not,
It's not.
yeah.
Okay. One less thing I have to do.
So, yeah, we're asking for a true up. There's no benefit to us asking for the same information over and over again, it just frustrates people. So,
so-
the true up information is the information we're actually gonna be asking for. I'm hoping to get that out in an email tomorrow or the next
Send a
day.
notice out to people that this is not due, because no one's known it's not due.
We've had so many people ask, a lot of people know.
And then in terms of taking something back, have you really thought about the load on you if you take
Yes,
back
I've
a
thought very,
portfolio?
very, very carefully about the load.
John's gonna do it?
We've restructured here. We've restructured and we actually have a asset management compliance person who works on our CDBG and home projects, so. Yeah,
After the 60-day true up, or after we have the PI true up, and we have 60 days to tell you how to spend it. If we wanna come in for a program income only funded something, I'm hearing timelines, would that be like an over-the-counter something funded with PI?
So
'Cause
everything-
I'm looking at timelines
yeah.
for the application.
so everything that's PI only is essentially OTC. It's
Okay.
just us looking to make sure you have all your pieces.
Okay.
And that's part of the thing is that we have to create a separate application type for that. And
So
honestly,
we
it's,
respond, that's our intention.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We just haven't, this is a huge lift for us in terms of our pilot in a pilot. And, you know, if we waited till everything was perfect, we'd never kick it off. So,
Yeah, I just wanna be able to go back to the
Yeah.
jurisdiction.
give them some level of confidence that that's something they can do. If they're gonna come in for an open grant, they'll put your PI in your open
Yeah.
grant, just so you don't get in trouble.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Pre-agreement costs. So if you're gonna try and reimburse pre-agreement costs, because you did a really good job and you procured everything correctly and you tracked your costs and they're within 24 months of submitting your application, you're gonna go over to here into other. You're going to have add table. You're going to have pre-agreement, and it's going to be, cool, now we know. Right, it's super straightforward, say it's pre-agreement, we know that means that you've already spent the money, you're looking to be reimbursed on it, and that it's included in your total project budget. It is part of your jurisdiction cap, right?
When you scroll up, all this is going up and filling that top table, right? I just wanna see what the top down looks like.
Yep. So it's got my program income component in
Yeah.
there. If I had match, it would have match, but we aren't doing match requirements. It's got my total, my other funding, so this is that pre-agreement, other cost is showing up
So
in
the
there.
other is gonna get loaded into direct cost at the top.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But your pre-agreement costs are they pretty much general admin in nature, like your NEPA? I can't think of
Well, it
anything
could
else.
also be-
Could be the
Some
engineering
setup
design.
stuff.
It could be engineering and design.
Okay.
You know, we had talked about doing pre-development, that is still an option. We really don't wanna do that because it's high risk, so we'd rather you just do pre-agreement costs and come in with a ready-to-go
But you're
project.
not doing a project that would like be a choice limiting action, you know?
Correct.
So, I'm just maybe speaking out loud here.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes, take yourself up to the choice limiting action barrier
And anything before that?
and anything before that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And we haven't actually set a ceiling on pre-agreement costs, we've just set a time frame. So we wanna see what comes out of this. This is kind of a experiment in our pilot, in a pilot. It's like a co-pilot. Okay, questions? Budget? Clear as mud? All right. Well, cruise through the rest of the stuff pretty quick. Preparing your budget, oh, yep, you calculate, you're in charge. Okay, so budget for future PI. We don't want to disencumber grant funds, we really don't want to. It makes extra work for contracts and they hate it, and it makes our staff generally sad. We feel like we failed when we have to disencumber grant funds. We take it personally. I know. Okay, application review. Plan to review your application before you hit submit. Please, 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 plan. When you're completing your application, and you say this, when you get down to the bottom, there are 2 save buttons. There's a gray save as button and there's a blue save button. You hit that blue save button, every incomplete field is gonna error. It's gonna be like, you didn't complete this, you didn't complete that. If you hit that save draft button, nothing will error, it will just save your stuff. So save that blue button for when you're ready to actually submit it. You can't trigger the submit button until you hit the blue save button. Use save draft, save draft, save draft, save draft, then it won't error. But review your application really thoroughly. Go into the view mode, look at it, make sure everything is there, make sure there's no typos, that all of the words are the words that you want them to be, not words that you didn't want them to be. Check your drafts and your uploads. All right, make sure you've got the correct draft in your uploads. You can check your uploads pretty easily. You can view them in the application once you're looking at it, so you can see which one is in there. I would recommend creating an upload file that has your final drafts and a naming convention so that you know what the final drafts are, keeping it very organized. If you have your narratives in a Word doc, you can cut and paste, and your files, your uploads in a designated file, all named, the actual procedure to get this thing complete is about half an hour. So organization is your friend.
Can you submit, will it allow you to submit if you're missing something?
If it's something that's been marked required, you cannot submit. It won't let you save it. Right? It'll let you save a draft, but it won't let you save it. The workaround is you go put dummy information in there, and all of a sudden you've saved it with dummy information, and you've submitted it with dummy information, then we kicked it back with dummy information, because that's kind of how that works. Okay. I just talked about this, save and save. Once you submit, you get a confirmation.
You do submit draft once, then you come back in and submit draft again. Does it number them, or should you be
So
numbered?
it doesn't submit it. When you save it as a draft, it just saves whatever's there.
Okay, so it's just a perpetual save on the draft, okay.
Yeah. And it actually works really well. I've pressure tested it, so. Once you submit, you get a confirmation, a timestamp, so you know you submitted. Oh, no, it's wrong. But here's where it's okay. So if you've prepared your application early and you've submitted a bit before the deadline, like a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and you realize you have an error in your competitive application, you tell us, we'll unlock it, let you go fix it. It's really easy. You just return it to draft and you get a notification your application has been kicked back to draft, you can go in there and fix it. You find an error in your OTC application, you hit submit and you realize you uploaded the wrong draft of your NEPA, let us know. The sooner you let us know, the sooner we can kick it back into draft, the sooner you can resubmit it. The odds of you losing your place online are substantially reduced, right? So plan your review time so that you can catch stuff. You can review this after it's submitted. You hit submit. You can't go in and edit it anymore, but you know, you watch me go into the application, there's a view button and an edit button. You can continue to view it in perpetuity. Oh no, it's wrong, and now it's too late. If you don't find an error until 48 hours, if it's 2 hours before submittal deadline or 12 hours before submittal deadline, like, oh no, it's wrong. Dude, you're killing us. We aren't going to be able to go in and unlock it. Like at 48 hours, what you've submitted is what you've submitted. If you find it after the due date for the competitive, I'm sorry, that's a bummer. It's kind of done. OTC, if we find the error, we're going to kick it back to draft and send it back to you. And depending on what the error is, there may not be a whole lot of conversation about it, which means you lose your place in line, you're back at the end of the line. Your application is still whole, but you've got to fix it and resubmit it, and then you're back wherever you are. You'll be much happier if you find the errors than we find the errors. So, plan your review very, very thoroughly. Okay. submitting your application, do ask questions. If there's anything you're just not sure about, ask questions. Check the FAQ, the updates, plan time to review, fix errors. We're gonna do our very best to help you be successful. I think that's kind of a motto and a mentality we've been really trying to help share with our grantees, so. All right, last thing, troubleshooting for your application. So we've had a lot of conversations about what happens with your application. We're gonna lock the narratives in, and when I say lock it in, what I mean is we're gonna go mark the stuff that's required. If you're got into the application now, you've noticed there's 3 fields required. It's like a title, an organizational name, and one other one, I can't remember what it is. Doesn't matter. When we're done, almost everything is gonna be required. There's only gonna be a handful of things that are not required. So that's what I mean when I say lock it in, so that you can't hit submit without the appropriate fields in there. We don't want anybody to have to re-enter information, so do your narratives outside of your application in the meantime. If that becomes a non-issue in the future, that's great, but this is, again, a pilot. I don't want anyone to lose their information. That would be awful. If you have problems after we've locked the application in, so you're like, form field on such and such application is just totally erroring, and now it's February 20th, and we're like, well, shoot. Tell us, and we'll see what we can do to fix it. We're still going to be trying to fix things even after we've locked it in. We're just trying to get as much fixed before we lock it in. And we'll be triaging issues. They have been a fantastic partner in this, super, super responsive. They've tried really hard to help us do this right. So I have their CEO on speed dial. It's pretty awesome. The application issues on deadline. So deadline, it's creeping up, 2 minutes to deadline. You're trying to hit submit and the dang thing's erroring at you. You know your application is complete, you've done your review, like you did everything you could, you know it's good. Shoot us an email. Email is a timestamp. Like we'll deal with it, we'll accept your application, we'll get the issue resolved, no harm, no foul. If your application is not complete and at 2 minutes to deadline you're having issues, sorry, that's a bummer. Oh, timing. And a note, we can see your applications on the backside, which is awesome because we can help you with them. It also lets us know exactly how complete they are at any given time. So, we'll know if you were trying to hit submit on a incomplete application with 2 minutes to deadline. It's not I deleted all my stuff. It's like, oh, it didn't.
I gave my paper, right?
Yeah, which is great for us, but it's going to actually be as much of a learning tool for us also to see how we actually administer the back end of this. So that's kind of where we are. So I have a couple questions for you guys. Is there anything that you wish we talked about that we didn't? Or is there anything where you wish we had a little more detail as we kind of talked this through? Knowing that we kind of got the context of what is CDBG outside of the conversation. Anything where you're having severe anxiety? Except maybe scoring. Yeah, check.
That EI issue.
Yeah.
Especially the allocations of PI, make sure that the grantee can actually do the work, get the funds, like you said, assigning it to GA, as well as that future. 'Cause I see the future differently in terms of the project's gonna be 1 year, but your contract is 3 years. Why would you project out 3 years of PI?
Oh, you wouldn't. You'd project out your project.
What happens
Yeah.
then? What happens to those funds if then you don't use them?
Well, hopefully you're
Yeah.
coming in for another grant.
No. Say you put them in there, and I'm saying, well, guess what? They're contingency for overruns, and we don't use that contingency. Do they just still remain PI for use for the next grant?
No, because you do have to use it first, so what you'll end up with is as excess grant. It does encumber whatever you didn't use.
You would just encumber grant funds, so
Yeah.
we're back to lowering the grant amount.
Right,
Okay.
which we're trying really hard not to do. We're given lots of options here.
Well, federal regs say substantially used. There is no
Substantially used.
zero.
Yes.
So I guess that's what substantial is the big question in terms of.
Yeah, substantial is not spend to zero, substantial is do your best, and if something's in flux or something's in the works, you know, if there's $10,000 or $20,000 or 35 really, is kind of the limit, that's kind of in the works, nobody's gonna have an issue. If you're sitting on $500,000 because you substantially used all your PI, I'm gonna give you cross eyes. So,
Well, the issue is like someone, example, had PI, most of it was from housing.
mhm.
They, Future was using it for housing, but an ED project came in and they were forced to move that money and use it for an ED activity.
Set up an RLF.
Well, but it wasn't, it was OTC. So the RL, or you said the RLF for the housing.
Yeah, so, I mean, we can talk about this. We'll do
Yeah.
more training on the PI.
That's
and
why I just said that part I could see more.
Yeah, and I do want to have a conversation with you about PI, because I want to get a full feel for the issue, so when we come and do our PI training next time, we're fully informed and we're answering the questions folks have. Because I know how I think of it, but I'm not super telepathic, only a little bit, so it doesn't always all get out there. Anything else? Crazy anxiety? Yeah.
This is a quick one. In the old way of applying, I do a lot of housing rehab. We do our application and then you had, if you got funded, this whole general setup process. And that's all going away. But one of the things in that general setup process was my contract for the activity with the jurisdiction. It's sounding like you want that now. What if we don't have that in place? Is that threshold or will they just, okay, so if they want to apply for housing rehab, they need to be under contract with me for that
They
activity.
need to rock and roll.
Okay,
Yep.
just want to
If
confirm.
they want you operating their housing rehab, they need to get you under contract.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
just want to confirm.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, the goal here is that, so when I was been doing research on these state programs, there's a whole bunch of these state programs that require that you draw 5% of your grant award down within 30 days of your standard agreement, or 60 days of your standard agreement. And, you know, that's a lot of money in some of these. Like, you have 5% ready to go out the door. Their expectation is that you are so set up that you're spending money the second you've got a signature on your contract. We're not quite there yet. I'd really like to see us get there, though. I don't ever want to have to put that into a requirement. I'd like it to just be there organically because our projects are so awesome.
Same thing with guideline approval, those.
So we aren't requiring adopted guidelines, you just have to have guidelines, right? We talked about this quite a bit. We didn't want to force folks to adopt what we know are insufficient guidelines. We're working on a draft of getting sufficient guidelines. We're actually hoping to have those out fairly soon, but we're not excited about you taking insufficient guidelines to your
Going to
council
city
saying,
council, yeah.
approve these. Oh no, we'll be back in 3 months with the
Change.
real ones because HCD is kind of a hot mess. So a little flexibility on the front end to help make it a little bit more effective on the back end.
I'm excited.
Cool. Well, we'll be looking for your applications. I can see your emails in the back. I'm like, oh, look who, Sarah. And again, if you find anything broken, anything doesn't make sense, it's not working, let us know. We'll fix it if we can. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna meet, it's one set of programs.